to everyone here, and welcome, and to everyone that's tuning in on the web. This reading is from Affirmations for Self-Healing by Swami Kriyananda on self-confidence. Self-confidence, as it is normally understood, recalls to mind images of army generals and cowboy heroes, people in short who know their blacks from their whites. But life's alternatives are usually much more complex. Self-confidence on the spiritual path is of another order altogether. It means confidence in the inner self, not in the ego. It means living from within, living by truth rather than by opinions. It means living by what God wants and not by what man wants. Thus, it means living by faith in the sure knowledge that although man is fallible, God is infallible. And let's affirm together, I live in the assurance of God's truth within, in my inner self, and not in the opinions of others, lies true victory. I live in the assurance of God's truth within, in my inner self, and not in the opinions of others, lies true victory. And a little quieter, I live in the assurance of God's truth within, in my inner self, and not in the opinions of others, lies true victory. And whispering, I live in the assurance of God's truth within, in my inner self, and not in the opinions of others, lies true victory. And silently, I live in the assurance of God's truth within, in my inner self, and not in the opinions of others, lies true victory. And please pray silently with me. What matter if people blame me? Of what importance is their applause? I live to please Thee, Lord, confident that when Thou art with me, I am protected, though it be from an enemy horde. And from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda, entitled To Each According to His Faith. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 3, we read, Every one that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deed should be reproved. But he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in God. It is common experience shared by most people that when a person errs, he experiences a desire to hide that error from his conscience, instead of holding it up for purification. Error clutches its misdeeds to itself and resists correction, though it is only in the state of purity that we can achieve perfect freedom. It requires an act of will to offer that awareness up to the light, and to hold it there until one's inner darkness is completely dissipated. For every state of consciousness has its own attractive power. And the more we follow that attraction to act upon us, and the more we allow that attraction to act upon us, the more we attract to ourselves the objective circumstances and experiences natural to it. Our faith is the attractive power of our underlying states of consciousness. Goodness attracts goodness. It takes goodness even to see goodness. Evil attracts evil, and it takes evil even to see evil. That is, to take special note of its existence. Whatever there is in you of darkness or light, offer it to the heights. In the supreme light alone will we find salvation. Accept nothing less than yourself as your lasting reality. As the Bhagavad Gita says in the 12th chapter, Cling thou to me, clasp me with heart and mind, so shalt thou dwell surely with me on high. But if thy thought droops from such height, If thou beest weak to set body and soul upon me constantly, despair not. Give me lower service. Seek to reach me, worshipping me with steadfast will. And if thou canst not worship steadfastly, work for me. Toil in works pleasing to me. For he that laboureth right for love of me shall finally attain. But if in this thy faint heart fails, bring me thy failure. Thus through Holy Scripture God has spoken to mankind. It's one of the most beautiful readings in the Gita. That gives us all hope. And from Whispers from Eternity by Paramahansa Yogananda. Where are we here? Okay. I'm always so happy to have this slip of paper that has written down the page. Because otherwise I'd be a few minutes here wondering. Okay. This is entitled, Keep the Compass Needle of My Attention Ever Pointing Toward Thee. Whether soaring through the sky encased in a steel air cage, or drawn o'er the land by snorting iron steeds, or moving easily over smooth highways on rubber wheels, or having my very thoughts paralyzed by the pounding din of assembly lines, the compass needle of my attention will ever keep turning toward thy magnetic North Pole of divine love. Beaten by winds of happenstance, drenched by cloudbursts of misery, sucked down in the mud of soul-meshing, ego-whipped activity, or wandering lost in jungles of confusion, my mind will yet ever reach out for thy guiding touch. The raft of my life, tossed about helplessly by the driving storms of need, was drifting towards rocks of insatiable desire. O pole star, in our wisdom skies, thy twinkling light beckoned and directed me toward thy shores of eternal contentment. Though countless mechanisms pound, twist, or stretch my anguished nerves, yet will the homing pigeon of my love wing its way peacefully towards its home in thee. Many years ago, when I was very, very new, I overdid my seclusion. And you would think, well, what is that? Go into seclusion. Seclusion is a prize for greatness, as Swami Kriyananda said. But not knowing, again, being so new, that I should have used my intuition, as we should use our intuition for everything ideally, little things, things that are middle-sized, and of course, big things. I should have, on a daily basis, which now I do in every seclusion, there's the inner sanction to go into seclusion, and then there's that inner sanction time to go. You've done good enough, time to go, and we've got to get that right. It's subtle. Anyway, I didn't get it right, and I was 2 or 3 weeks just killing myself, meditating long hours. And it was so extreme. It's laughable now. It wasn't then. But that's the joy of Father Time. That I wouldn't even read a book. If I couldn't meditate, I would sit in what was in my teepee, American-style teepee. In those days, I had, very luxuriously, a big, huge orange beanbag pillow. I love those to this day, although I haven't sat on one for a long time. But that was my meditation seat, and it could be form-fit perfectly, and everything is great. So anyway, if I wasn't meditating, I would just sit and wait to meditate. I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. With wonderful books to read and all the things, going on a meditation walk, so many things, which I learned later. And so, anyway, I just burnt myself. I should have smelled the nerves burning. Even that I wasn't, aware of. So this was a sorry state. Well, anyway, there in Northern California, in Ananda, on the many acres where we had the community and so forth. And at the time I was a monk, I was in the monastery. There are these beautiful walks. So somehow in all this extreme austerity, I allowed myself to take some walks, 3 cheers. So anyway, I left my teepee, so grateful, to get out of whatever I was doing in there, and took a walk. Well, I got shocked because in the distance was Swami Kriyananda. He was taking a walk too, and he was coming toward me. And my impulse was to jump into the manzanita bush, which I thought maybe he's far enough away and glancing down at something that he wouldn't notice. But I looked up and saw that he was looking at me. And I thought that I probably should face the music and face him. And I thought, well, if I don't, it'll probably, as is often the case, will be compounded. At one point he'll say to me, "Haridas, you did such an odd thing. I was walking toward you to greet you, and you jumped in a bush and ran away." So I thought, I can't do that. But I didn't know how I could face him, because what had happened to me is because I had overdone it. My nerves were not shattered, but they were not in good shape. And they were not in good shape to see him, a being of that consciousness and so calm and all these things. So anyway, I just thought, here we go. And as we got closer and closer and closer, being from the West, it kind of reminded me of like an old gunfight. You've got the two guys and they're about ready to face off. These images, silly. But it was like there was real tension. And all the more because I knew he was not in the state that I was in, of course. He was in a wonderful state. And I wanted to see him. But I wanted to see him in a different state of consciousness and not, this vibrating jumble of nerves. And so I just thought, well, let's just do it. That's just part of the deal. It'll make a good story later. Whatever I was thinking. That gave me the courage to continue to walk toward him. So finally he came. He didn't say a word to me. He just gave me a hug. And it was a long hug, probably. I never experienced that before. I don't think ever from him. But nevertheless, there it was. And as he was embracing me, I could feel that he was just basically healing me. And so when we parted, again, he didn't say a word. And I was kind of thinking, maybe he should have said, well, overdid it, huh? Something. He's a man of great humor. He could have said something because he saw, what was there before him. Didn't say a word. He just walked on back on down to his house, down the hill. And I wasn't, fully healed. He probably could have done that, but I think he probably figured that I needed, to kind of work on, the situation myself too. Well, I mention this because it's very, very common for us when we are trying to reform. And of course, the inner life, now that we are so blessed to be aware of the inner life, of course, we're going inside to work on ourselves. A disciplined mind is a happy mind. Keep the heart open. Meditate deeply. Every meditation should be deeper than the last. My goodness. The Gita, the great scriptures are all filled with ways that we can improve our lot in light and lift our consciousness. And that is all that we care about. But it's very easy to overdo. And when we overdo, then I hope that you don't have that kind of a situation as I had. But we do have our stories. And so we have to get it right. And that's where intuition comes in. How long to meditate. How to balance our meditation with our seva. Make sure we have fun. Remember, Yogananda would pass out to the monks Eskimo pies, ice cream, just to kind of, make sure that everyone remembered that this is a path of joy. Roma, my wife from time to time, loves to share this extraordinary dream I thought to share too this morning. And it was this man who was suffering from alcoholism, and he was completely addicted, and it was shattering his life. And so one time he had a dream, and dreams can be powerful. They can be super conscious, and they can really change our lives, and it certainly changed this man's life. And so he had a dream of this gorilla, an enormous gorilla, kind of a King Kong type, that was in this cage. And there was no way he could get away, because at this point the gorilla was shaking the bars, and it appeared that he had the strength, although the bars were thick, to part the bars, go after and devour him. And so again, he was in a situation where he couldn't get away, and he figured that this was it. So he was praying desperately, and all of a sudden Christ appeared before the cage. And Christ said to him, "If you don't feed him, he'll die." And he knew that the gorilla was his addiction to alcohol. And the message for him was 100% clear. All you have to do, as Yogananda said, if you want to get out of a bad habit, go in the opposite direction. If you're sleeping too much, sleep less. On and on it goes. It couldn't be any easier. And so we don't want to feed those tendencies to diminish ourselves, and by extension diminishing others, because as Yogananda said, if you see wrong in others, it's just because it's wrong in yourself. What's the vision of the Masters? The vision of the Masters is to see us all as lights, and that's a pure vision. That is not an affirmation. That's an absolute experience of pure consciousness. This is what they see. And Yogananda would say to his disciples, if you could only see, I see you all as light. And so it's a really fine line. And that's why long ago when I heard that the spiritual path was a razor's edge, I thought, you bet it is. You bet it's the razor's edge. And if you get it right, you're fine. If you can stay on the straight and narrow and stay in tune. Attunement's everything to God and the great ones. But if we get it wrong, it's the razor's edge, and it cuts us and it hurts. And that's okay, because although, as Yogananda said, he just would wilt when he would have to influence others except through love, when he had to discipline, as he had to do from time to time. God, the great ones, they don't want to have to discipline us to break through our hard heart and our hard head, but if need be, then they do, especially to those ones that are receptive and open. The Master, during his lifetime, if people resisted, then he would say in so many ways, it wasn't my need to come and help you. It was your need. So, until you're open, then I will wait. And so then the question becomes fairly obvious. Do we want to have God and the great ones who have the power? Make no mistake, they have the power to change us right now. Right now they could come and take us right into the light, and that would be permanent. And we wouldn't be a part of this crazy fiasco, this dream that tosses and turns us, day after day after day as we're struggling to get out of the dream. What did Yogananda say? He said, every single night, convince yourself before you go to bed that this world is a dream, which of course it is. And that's a very, very, very wise thing to do, because otherwise we can carry into the next day these troubles that we have and these worries when they have no reality. I've been doing something recently which has been very, very helpful with various things that come my way and drag my consciousness down and test me to get off center and so on. And I'll think to myself, in another minute, in another hour, in another day, or even when I leave this world, this is not going to be my focus. So, since time and space are an illusion, why don't you, just like a good kangaroo, jump across into that moment of bliss where you're not immersed in this present reality that's drawing your energy down. I've really been enjoying it. It's a lot of fun. I'm due to go to New York to see my girls, my wife and daughter. So I've been using that too. Okay, May 8th. And we're going to miss you all, of course. But May 8th. And on Tuesday, it's less than a month. And I've been doing this for months, And I've been saying, okay, it's almost a month now. Oh, it's almost a month. And now it's less than a month, and pretty soon weeks and so forth and so on. And again, it's not because we don't love India and love you all. It's just that, it's time to meet my buddies and just relax and have some fun. So even in these things, which, really is just a little thing, because I also keep in mind so that I understand, as I got the lesson from Gandhi long ago, and I love it. Gandhiji, do you ever take vacation? No, I'm always on vacation. So I also keep in mind that, guess what? In a flash, you're going to be back on the plane, back home. Okay? It's going to go by so quickly. And because we've shuttled back and forth so many times, I know it's an absolute fact. So on one level, I'm dreaming I'm on the plane and I'm on the way to Central Park and my friends. And then just make sure that I stay centered. I say, now I'm back on the plane and I'm heading back to India. And I like to keep both of them in mind, because that's the way to stay even-minded and cheerful. Because we don't want to be pushed around by anything at all, both inwardly or outwardly. And that's why, again, our goal is to be even-minded and cheerful at all times. It's why we have to remember that the fruit of meditation, primarily Kriya, is joy. And joy will inspire us, and joy will entertain us, and joy will protect us. As Master said, and what an amazing thing this is, he said, when I thought that I exhausted God's bliss, and now he's free, and he's in samadhi, and so his thought, there couldn't be any more, then another wave of bliss would come, because it's inexhaustible. That's where we've come from. That's where we are now, although, we're kind of wondering, when we're going to awake to that, and that's where we're going. And so it's a really fine line with reform. There's a funny story of Swami. Years ago, when he was, probably in his 20s, again, to keep things balanced, Master would play tennis with them and volleyball and go on picnics and eat watermelon and all these things. And so they were playing volleyball. And Swami was making lots of errors. And so, with the team, with the monks. And so, each time he'd say, I'm so sorry. And so then he would make another error. I'm so sorry. And so this was repeated a number of times. And so finally one of the monks said, we know that you're sorry. We appreciate that. But when will you reform? And when he told that story, we all laughed, and of course he did too, because that's what we're trying to do now. We're working, on pushing through. We're again a work in progress. I had there's all this construction here. The house next door, the house next door, and the house next door, all three. I was raised in Los Angeles. I've never seen so much construction on one block. And you Indians, every time I turn around, oh my God, another pile of bricks, and they're digging a hole, and they're smashing the building. It's everywhere around here, and it's great fun. My father was a civil engineer, so I was raised in all of this stuff. So anyway, the third building down, is that right? Second building up the street. They seemed like a perfectly fine place. The fellow moved out, and so the next people came in, and so it's always fun. My mother just loved renovating, so I was raised in that too. And so they started renovating. And so on the upper story, they put this steel frame, and it was there for quite some time. And I thought, oh my God, probably the wife is like in the States or something, and the husband has taken over the design, and he thought, maybe this would save some money. It's this ugly steel frame on this beautiful first story, and it was there for a long time. And so I thought, oh gee, I wasn't going to knock on the door and say, excuse me, but when is your wife coming back? That would have been inappropriate, obviously. And so I just, I go up there all the time, walking back and forth, catch rickshaws and go grocery shopping. And it just was there, day after day, week after week, maybe even months. Finally, then it was, plastered over, and now it's quite attractive. And I thought, very good, very good. I was thinking they didn't have their trip together, and they were going to have for the neighborhood, and across from the nice park, this odd thing. The first story looks nice, and then there's a steel frame on top of it. What is this? So for us, both in our own discrimination, in doing what we can to reform ourselves, remember, not just January 1st, but all the time we should be working on this project of reform. But we should also remember patience is a shortcut to finding God. We shouldn't jump to conclusions. This was a good lesson for me. Let it be. And let our own process as we are growing in our love for God, and as we're growing in tapping into the inner joy of the soul and so forth, and of course others, let it be, so that bit by bit we can appreciate that God, and sometimes we doubt this, God does know what he's doing. I love the image of a tapestry. And if you're looking up at the tapestry, let's say it's suspended up a bit, it doesn't look like they know what they're doing. And so you think, maybe you should lend them a hand. But then if you, get a little higher and you look down, you see, oh my God, this is exquisite. And so for us, it really is a balancing act where we want to be pushing forward in keeping our hearts open and keeping our minds positive. But at the same time, we have to be very, very careful if our intuition, common sense, and past experiences says we're overdoing. Because if we're overdoing, we're going to be going backwards. Because we're not going to be remaining still. We either go forward or we go backwards. And so that is to be absolutely avoided. And so that's why the key, and again, this is where the saints come in. Are we supposed to work on this particular issue that we have? Maybe something that we have been experiencing for years. And it's troubling for us, and also it's a little troubling for others because we're angry. We just can't help ourselves. And, next thing we know, boom, the human volcano explodes again, and the boss is wondering when we're ever again going to be, to reform. But with intuition, we understand how vital it is that the spine is this. Count your blessings, skip the rest. And with that joy, and with that spiritual power, and with partnership with God and the great ones, then we work on this project, which appears to be infinite. But don't make the mistake. Remember this. Our karma is not infinite. It's finite. We are not finite, we're infinite. A lot of people get that backwards and they get discouraged. I'll never find God. Yogananda had no patience for this. He said, don't say that. Say, I have him. He talks through me. He eats through me. He walks through me. Have that companionship and have it at all times. And that's why, again, we don't want to, when we go to bed, think that this is reality. It's not. This duality is a dream. And so reforming ourselves is a big project. Even Yogananda said, it's a big job. And that's from a master when thinking about what is required in making a perfect human being. But if we get it right, we know who we are and we know where we're going. And so we take things in stride. And we see things in perspective, both within and without. And pretty soon, again, life becomes a nest of fun and not a hornet's nest. Most people are having a very troubled time. As Yogananda said, life can be a terrible machine and it will eat you up. You think, oh my gosh, what a horrible thing. But it needn't be that. It needn't be that if we stay in tune, if we keep our consciousness uplifted. And so for all of us, to me, after my years on the path, we start to work on the basics. And I'll tell you, I feel there's many things to work on, but I feel that one of the very important qualities is simply to relax. Because when we are able to relax, mentally, emotionally, physically, and all that, then the humor comes back. And sometimes we can be a little humorless. if God is doing his bombardment on us and it's lasting too long. But when we're relaxed, then there's the smile. And then there's the love of God. And then there's the appreciation for the Leela. And there's the true understanding of who we are and where we're going. And so things will bubble to the surface if we again stay in tune. Things that will help us. Readings, perhaps. It's time to listen to more spiritual music. It's time to get more exercise. It's time to reform our diet. Whatever it might be, they will bubble to the surface and they will direct us in order to continue to reform. And the amazing thing is when we get it right, that one thing will collect its friends. And so we'll be working on our exercise, and the next thing we know, now we're having more juice. And we get a big bag of apples, and we haven't done it forever. Now we're juicing more. And then the next thing we know, we're calling a friend who we haven't talked to for a long time. And so on and so forth. And we start to feel, oh my God, it's much easier than I had even thought. If we stay in tune with God and the great ones, they will tell us what to do. Most people's conscience is dead. Most people's spiritual life is dead. And they're wondering why, with all the accumulation of things and so forth, why they're still unhappy. So at one point, finally, and it takes stubbornness, and again, Yogananda said he attracted stubborn people, but stubbornness in the right way, we become extremely stubborn in really protecting the love of the heart and really protecting our joy. We've worked very hard with, of course, the help of the great ones to get this center. And so pretty soon, that becomes our day. We want to make sure, time to swallow, we want to make sure that we are in that state of higher consciousness. And when we are dropped, sometimes quite harshly on the ground, some karma comes up, then we say that's all right. That's fine. Is the love of God still with me? Is the joy of my soul still with me? If you go deep enough, the answer will be yes. So what's the problem? You get up, kind of rub your nose a little bit, and hope that you don't have any black eyes, which will be embarrassing when you face your friends, and you get moving again. So the joy of spiritual family, the joy of the inner life, the joy of sadhana. My God, there are so many joys. We can't even count them all. And so God is joy, and joy is God, and we are his children, and so we too are that joy. And so, again, we need to get it right, and we can take a clue from Sri Yukteswar. Learn to behave, It's not perfect for him to say that. Learn to behave, that's it. And we know what it is to behave. We know what it is to be good. And remembering when Swami found the autobiography of a yogi, came from New York, 3,000 miles on the bus to the west, what did he have in mind? He said, I want God, and I want to share him. And so that's the ideal. We want, Yogananda himself said, that's the highest prayer. Lord, come to me so that I can give thee to all. And so we're not just, reforming ourselves. You want to change the world, you change yourself. When I first read that, I thought, very wise. And that really is true when it comes to our own home, whether it comes to our workplace, whatever it might be, and this world at large. Well, I think that's it for the moment. Let's please stand. We'll do our Aarti and blessing. God bless you.